PRD. Back in 2016, it was approved for that zoning with a major site development plan for both sides of Wilder Avenue, which included an improvement, and it was approved for 40 attached single-family homes on the two lots, and the two lots mirrored one another. The development on the 125 Wilder Avenue has now been completed, or is nearly complete, but the property owner is interested in developing the undeveloped lot at 130 Wilder Avenue into a slightly different development that would include 15 detached single-family units on small lots rather than the 20 previously approved townhomes. The site totals 3.73 acres and would have an overall net density of 10.1 dwelling units per acre, which meets the residential medium density standard. This is part of the Sunset Ridge subdivision, and there's single family homes to the north, open space to the east, Lincoln Way to the south, and townhomes to the west. The idea of the PRD is a concept to allow housing options that are not otherwise available with a conventional subdivision. And this plan does that. It has some interesting components that would not be part of a regular subdivision, in that the proposed units are rear loaded, as are the townhomes across the street. It means the garage is accessed off of a private street, which functions as an alley, and the front facade faces either Wilder Avenue or the common open space. There will be a covered front stoop entry with a sidewalk leading out to the public sidewalk. And the homes along Wilder have a standard 25-foot front yard. The homes on the east side of the site have a 10-foot setback to the property line that abuts the open space, with 20 feet to the sidewalk. And there's a 20-foot rear setback from the garage to the private street property line. Each residence includes a 2-car attached garage. There's numerous floor plans available. It was in your packet. You probably saw them. There's actually 4 different floor plans available with a range of 4 different colors and different roof line options. And just the change of the roof line substantially changes the look of a unit that may even have the same floor plan as what's next door to it. So there's the ability to have differentiation along the street, even if all of the units had the exact same floor plan. There's one unit that does not include a basement, and so it's slab on grade. That's the smallest of the units. It's 1,200 square feet with 2 bedrooms. The other units include 3 bedrooms with 2 of the bedrooms in the lower level, which is actually what we would probably call basement level. So the private street has a single point of access from Wilder Avenue. It aligns with the road, the private street that goes into the townhouse development. But we also did request that there be emergency access. So there is emergency access onto Lincoln Way that is paved with geoblock, which is a material that is overseeded with grass and hopefully will look like just a grass way and not a driveway. And it's not really expected to be used at all, but in those rare cases when there would be a fire truck that needed to exit out, that would be how they would do so. Staff believes that it would be important to accommodate on-street parking in this development. The developer is including the 2-car garage, and there is a long driveway that's about 36 feet long, I believe, that may accommodate 2 to 4 cars, depending on the size of the car, the vehicle. It could be pretty tight, but there's no public guest parking provided. And staff is recommending as one of the conditions of approval that one way to accommodate this would be to reduce the setback along the open space side, reduce it by 2 feet and add it to the pavement area of the private street. And that would give 26 feet of pavement, which is what we typically have in the city where we do include on-street parking. So that would add 3 guest parking spaces along that private drive. The common open space area is the same as what was proposed with the previous PRD, and the proposed open space does meet the 40% requirement of the PRD, and it would add a piece of open land to what's already been part of the subdivision. So it makes an even greater common open space to the east. So the PRD establishes, the way it works is it actually becomes the establishment of the zoning requirements, meaning the building height, the number of units, the bedrooms, the density, the site layout, all of the details that may otherwise be in a zoning table are established through the major site development plan that's associated with PRD. A complete analysis of all of this is in the findings and also within the addendum. And I'll go through some of the findings. Just so on page 11, the findings regarding the PRD development principles. We do feel that it does provide for innovative and imaginative approaches to the residential development that would not occur under the underlying zoning regulations. And it does replicate the pattern utilized with the townhome development across the street with the units facing Wilder Avenue and being rear loaded. We believe it is more efficient, aesthetic, and desirable use of the land while maintaining the land use meeting the land use policy plan and the underlying zoning of medium density residential. So there's a variety of units. We believe it's innovative in that it's not a typical, this pattern we have not really seen in Ames before for the detached single family homes, and the developers hoping to meet a market that's not being met right now. And we support that. The homes are single story with attached garages. And as I mentioned about the floor plan, there's variety. Skipping over to the PRD, permitted uses and supplemental development standards in attachment D. There will be 15 single-family detached units. As I mentioned, the net density would be 10.1, which is within the range for residential medium density. We believe it's compatible with the height of the structures in the adjacent neighborhoods, which are often 1 or 2 stories. We believe that the minimum yard and setback requirements are appropriate as proposed and as conditioned in our approval recommendation. Under number 5, parking requirements, as I mentioned there, each driveway, according to the applicant, would include space for 4 cars, but it would be rather tight to accommodate 4 cars. But that would be in addition to the 2-car garage. So they do meet the requirements for what would normally be for a home, but we're just concerned about having some guest parking provided and the fact that people are used to parking on the street. So they probably would park on the street even if the street doesn't accommodate it very well. So we're proposing that condition as a way to accommodate what we think may occur. So there also is an interconnected system of sidewalks that connects with the other phases of the subdivision as part of the open space improvements. The major open space there would be maintained by the Sunset Ridge Property Owners Association. The Homeowners Association for this development would be responsible for maintaining the private street. So there would be two different entities maintaining those outlots. Under the major site development plan criteria, the stormwater detention facilities were master planned for this development. That's why you don't see anything within the site plan itself. The existing infrastructure was planned initially for commercial use. I mentioned the emergency access way that's been approved by the fire inspector and through our development review committee. There is a ditch along the north end of the property that will convey stormwater away from the site. It also acts as a buffer area against those single-family residential homes to the north that are slightly lower density than this development. There's some shrubbery included to help screen driveways and to also help buffer to the north. And we don't expect the development to generate any nuisances. And we believe that the architecture is compatible, that they meet the open space requirements, that they comply with the layout. And so staff would just, in closing, recommend that you approve alternative 1, which is that you recommend that the City Council approve the request at 130 Wilder for an amended PRD with a base zone residential medium density to include 15 detached single-family housing units, and that you approve the major site development plan subject to approval of a preliminary and final plat for creation of the proposed residential lots as depicted on the site plan. And that as a condition to that approval, that the site layout and street design be amended to accommodate on-street parking. And that concludes my presentation.
I just want to add, just Eloise alluded to this. This is kind of a product type that's starting to be evaluated again in the housing market, which is to try and look at a lower cost single family home option compared to townhomes. We haven't seen this in AIM time. There's very in AIM a couple decades ago of where there's lots under 5,000 square feet in the city without having an attached wall. So as you start to look at this, I think it's the first one you're seeing, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's successful that you'll start to see more versions of this. So this is really your first exposure to a very small version of it with only 15 homes in it. It is something that that the applicant's familiar with. They've built it before in the Des Moines area. We have visited, or Eloise has visited one of the sites in Des Moines to get a better understanding of the homes and how the sites work. They're always a little bit different. This has a private street. Some cities have public streets. And as you start to look at this, you have to start to think about, well, we're trying to produce a different house. It still is a single family in nature. And then what do you see as features and attributes that support this relief of letting them have smaller lots and having a private street compared to doing conventional development? And as Eloise said, we're supportive of this overall. We think this is a good approach. It's a good compromise of trying to accomplish multiple goals on a very small piece of property. And so we're encouraged by the proposal and looking forward to the commission's discussion about it.
Any questions for Eloise?
I'm just curious, Eloise, did they express what the maybe approximate spacing was going to be between the homes at all?
I believe it's 8 feet.
Okay.
Let me just check that. It's in these plans, but I know the print is small.
Yeah, looking for the dimension.
says side setback is 6 feet.
Is it 6 feet?
Uh-huh.
All right, I'm sorry.
So it'd be 6
That's what
feet
it
for
would
each
be.
property.
So 6
So
feet to
on-
the property line, so between the
12
two would be 12 feet
Okay.
minimum.
That would be your typical 1-story single family minimum setback. So they're not asking for really a side yard setback deviation, or even really they're not asking for setback deviations.
Okay.
Just total lot size.
And the footprints do vary a little bit, not substantially, not a substantial amount, but so there could be a little bit of variation between the actual footprint of the house depending on the floor plan that's chosen. But they would still meet that setback requirement.
Okay. So there, excuse me, Kelly, there are other homes where the homes are that close together, single family homes.
Yeah, so it's probably not helpful to tell you about them now, but probably the two most analogous is there's one, it's Woodhaven, which is in the Stonebrook area, and it's a strange little block. It was kind of that transition block from the rest of Stonebrook to a more conventional development. It's a mix of bi-attached homes and then some detached wedge between. So it's like a 2, a 1, a 2, and they're on like a zipper lot. So it kind of is an odd interconnected lot pattern. And it's the closest thing in terms of having like a 45-foot width lot, but it has a weird kind of staggered approach. And then there's another PRD at the very end at the north end of Bloomington Heights. So as you start to leave town on Hyde Avenue, there's a small PRD that started out as 2 attached homes on again, but the later phase was broken up to allow for individual homes on lots that were between 43 and 53 feet wide and about a 4,000 square foot lot. That private street's called Brickman. You would not know it exists unless you lived in that neighborhood because it's tucked away. So there are very few examples for us about that unless you really start to look back at more. We see a lot more of the attached product from the older style development in the 80s than we've seen it lately.
Okay.
I just a couple clarifications. On page 11, it says their units are 800 to 1,200 square feet, but on page 2, it says 1,200 to 1,578. Which is the actual correct size range?
Yeah, that's not correct. The actual smallest is 1,200 square
Okay.
feet, and it goes up to 1,570.
Okay.
Let's see,
1578.
1,578.
Yeah, okay. So that's the correct number. All right.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
And just a sort of point of clarification from the city's perspective, in terms of allowing on-street parking on a 26 versus a 24-foot street, what's the sort of, what's the divide there? That's a 2-foot difference, and I know it's 2 feet can be meaningful, but
It's very meaningful. So you will not allow parking on a 24-foot wide street because it would not then operate as a fire access lane. So we have to have 20 feet clear, and even allowing 26 is marginal on really literally having 20 feet clear. So if it's a 24-foot wide road, you cannot park on it. It will be just a fire access lane. So the 2 feet is the same as our public street standard where we allow parking on one side.
on one side, but not
Only on
both.
one side. And in this case, when they look at the design, so one thing that happens with the smaller width lots is the driveways get more repetitive and there's not space between them, between the aprons for you to normally have parking. So the result of our recommendation is because of the lot spacing, that 3 parking strip spaces would be added to the private street.
And those 3 would be at where it bends in?
It would be on the east side of the lane configuration.
North-south, the straight piece.
They would be fit in between driveways where it can be done.
Okay.
I mean, the road would probably just be 26 feet wide. It wouldn't be a cutout necessarily. That would be an option, I guess, if they wanted to look at doing a cutout for 2 feet where the spaces are. So it's more clearly, this is where the space is. That would be fine also. Or you could do a uniform 26-foot wide street.
Okay.
Any other questions at this time?
Go ahead.
Can you remind me, is there a sidewalk or a trail on the north side of Lincoln
Yes.
along the Okay. There's
Yes,
an existing.
there's a multi-use trail on the north side of Lincoln Way.
For Sunset Ridge subdivision, there's a disconnect from it then into the
Right.
city, but Sunset Ridge, its frontage is improved to city standards. And right now, the city is looking to correct that gap by building on the south side of Lincoln Way to connect from Wilder over to South Dakota Avenue.
So the multi-use pass will be on the south side, right past it.
As a city project, it will be. So if development occurs between Sunset Ridge and then to the east towards the city, that would all eventually. But because of the gap now, the city has a separate CIP project unrelated to development to build on the south side of Lincoln Way, a shared use path.
To where?
From Wilder, so the Wilder on the south side back towards Come and Go.
Okay,
Back that way and connect up. So there's two gaps, one on the north and one on the south.
right.
The north would be filled if development or when development ever happens on the north. The city's taking on a project on the south side because that's the backyards of other lots. That's never going to change if the city doesn't do a project there. And that's what they're evaluating in the CIP right now is to close that gap with the city project.
I know it does need to be
Yep.
closed up because it's, people go out onto the
Yeah.
Lincoln Way.
Right, because there's a disconnect.
The applicant like to speak on item 6?
I still,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
yes.
thought you asked your
The
question.
alley is that where the parking's on-street parking's going to be?
Yes.
If you take our recommendation, if you don't take our recommendation, there'll be no parking on site except in the driveways. And one reason why we're recommending this is on the public street frontage, there is no allowance for public parking. I think if we had reasonable access to public parking on a public street, I don't know that we would make this recommendation, but because Wilder is limited, you can't have parking on it, and then Lincoln Way doesn't have parking, there's not really overflow or guest parking in the area. Guest parking spaces also built into the design.
The way that this place is set up, the driveways allow for at least 2 more cars.
Just like, yeah, so that's just like a typical home. You have your 2 spaces in the garage and at least 2 on the driveway apron. Depending on, again, whether you could stack another 2 cars is a question of how well people park before it sticks out.
Badly, but so they're really, you're trying to fulfill a need that isn't needed.
I would look at that differently. Every home in the city of Ames is on a public street and has public, not every home, almost every home in the city is on a public street, which has some element of on-street parking available for visitors or guests or homeowners, plus driveway parking, plus garage parking.
But this is a private street or alley, which,
Private street, correct.
right,
It's not an alley because there's no frontage on the other side to make it an alley. It is a private street providing the only access to a 1 row of lots versus having a public street on both sides of the development
right.
and having it truly just be an alley where we wouldn't expect parking to be.
I guess I don't see the need for you to take out some of their driveway space so that they can park on the street. If limit the amount of parking.
So our recommendation, to be clear, is that to accommodate the 2 feet of paving, again, you could do this as carve-outs, not necessarily make the whole street wider, which would affect nobody's driveways if we just did the 2 feet carve-out. But our compensation would be to reduce the setback on the east side for that row of homes that are up against the open space. There's no setback issues there. You're hundreds of feet away from another home. So taking 3 feet out of that front yard setback and using it to allow for the parking to exist would be a way to accommodate without affecting any driveway spacing. There's 2 ways to do this without affecting driveways.
So I might just chime in. On page 5 in the addendum, there was a discussion about the applicant indicated that if on-street parking was provided, they would lose driveway space. Our recommendation subsequent to that discussion with them was to reduce the front yard setback against the open space, and so that it would not reduce the driveway length at all, but they would have 2 feet that they could take from over here and add it. and still have the driveway width that they're proposing now. So it wouldn't reduce the driveway length. So it wouldn't reduce that at all. So the condition is to reduce the setback that is against the open space by 2 feet and add it to the pavement area.
So take from the backyard, but to the front yard.
Can you just put the graphic up and then we can just show you what that would mean? So you
Right.
And the
Depending on
next
what you're
question.
calling the back and the front, we wouldn't.
so we would take it away from the open space lot side, which doesn't have neighbors, and allow you then to shift the
The
home.
Wilder side.
Nope, the open space side. Wilder
Oh, okay.
is on the west side. That's one way to do it without affecting anybody's driveways.
Kelly, how far away is the closest like on-street public parking? Just out of curiosity, I assume
It
it's
would
up
be
north.
to the north. It'd be that immediate block to the north. So it'd be one lot further north. Then you have local streets again that aren't.
Okay.
The reason you can't park on Wilder is because of the median that's there.
Oh,
And then the median goes away at this intersection, and then you have one lot of homes before you get back into a normal local street system.
okay. I'm just thinking if someone decides to have a party and obviously invites, 20 folks or whatever, and they're all coming to one of these houses, obviously having no additional off-street parking or on-street parking for additional guests could be tricky. I mean, obviously people will park, hopefully, in legal parking spots, but I can see the value of having a couple additional spots, especially for folks maybe who aren't as mobile and need to park more closer to a residence.
So Durant is the local street. That's this one, the lot to the north of here. So that would be.
So we're talking about reducing this setback here and then adding the space here to
Okay.
this
That's,
pavement area. So it would just shift this over.
where are they gonna park there? Though? I mean, they're
And you
just
can have-
in between those.
So if you made the whole road 26 feet wide, then wherever there's at least 20 feet between driveway aprons is where you would have legal parallel parking on the street.
Okay. And that walkway or path on the right-hand side, right there where she's pointing, their party goers can go from Durant to the houses.
If you have the location maps, you can see the broader area. So as part of this project, those homes on the east side of the site will construct a sidewalk that'll go from Lincoln Way across the front of those homes, and then it's going to go east across the open space to connect to a walkway that's built off of Durant. It's about a half a block further east of these homes. You have the local.
So it'll go here. Is that what you're meaning?
Yeah.
This-
So you walk. It goes. I think it goes over. Yeah.
It'll
It goes
go
over
through
further than that. So right now there's a pathway from Durant into the open space. There's a basketball pad, I think is what's there, but it doesn't connect through the open space down to Lincoln Way. So this project will connect over to that path and then bring it a way down to Lincoln Way as well.
And that big open space will stay a park or whatever.
It's a private HOA recreation facility, right?
Okay. And then, what way do you get from over straight to Wilder?
On the sidewalk on Lincoln Way is so there's no east-west through connection in the project. You have to go down to Lincoln Way to go east-west.
So
if the people were parking on the west side of this development, wanted to park on Durant, they'd have to go all the way down the Lincoln Way and over.
or they could come along.
Or they'd have to go back to Wilder.
They could come along Wilder. Depending
Yeah,
on
you can- I mean-
coming to visit these folks
Yeah, I mean,
or
that's-
these folks.
Talk about those folks.
Either way, I mean, you would have to walk right. So the way it's set up, if you park on Durant and you're going to visit the east row of homes, you are going to have to walk through the private street and up their driveway to get into the home, unless you were to be further east on Durant and walk on the private walkway system. So I would expect very commonly you are going to have people walking in the private street to access the homes.
I guess what you're trying to get at is there's no east-west connection
Yes.
from the east sidewalk that's coming down from Durant down east, going and servicing the houses that are fronting Wilder, especially the ones that are further south on that block.
And it's the HOH's problem, I guess, that there's no access from the houses on the west side going to the HOH common area.
You'd have to go down to Lincoln Way over to the sidewalk.
Was there any discussion on having some sort of connection on the northern side?
On the
of
northern
the
side, I
lot?
think
Like,
Well, there is this,
there's a ditch, there's a pond
ditch there
or
now.
ditch, right? Was there any discussion of maybe having something run along there?
I think
East-west?
the complications of where the footprint of the home was going to be with that facility, we did not dive into that one for very long. We talked about sidewalk connectivity, what's minimum code requirements. Well, minimum code requirement is you have access from the front door to a sidewalk that goes to the public street. So on the east side, they meet that standard. We could have looked at putting a sidewalk with the private street as an internal sidewalk. That's not where we landed when in discussions with the applicant. We discussed east-west, but with the spacing of the lots, it was going to compromise their lotting pattern, and they didn't believe that they could keep 15 lots if they had to put an east-west sidewalk in. So that's how we arrived at this arrangement, was trying to ensure that there was at least a walkway out of every house to the public street, but internally, it's not necessarily the most convenient from all directions.
And the front faces there, what you were calling the private street or the alley, is where the front door faces. So Wilder and the common area are the back of the houses.
No, Wilder will look like the front door to a house, and then they have us. So show us the elevation always. So what you would identify as the front of the home does not face the private street. It will face Wilder, just like the townhomes across the street. The front door faces Wilder, even though they're mostly accessed from the garage and the rear of those units. And then on the open space, it's the same pattern, so the facade that does not have the garage is the one that faces Wilder, and it's the facade that faces the open space as well. So you can see the walkway will come out to that. And then in the private street, the garage facade is what
Walkway out to Wilder on the west side.
Wilder into the open space, yes. And there's no, I don't believe, there's no pedestrian door on the rear facade. It's garage access, right?
In a few cases, they have a deck with an exit to the rear, but not in every case. There's a couple of floor plans with that option.
So this amounts to a
So this,
more modest
these,
priced house.
It should, because A, the lot's smaller, and B, the home is, I mean, you can build this size of home on any lot in the city, but the ratio is more appropriate to the lot size versus the larger land areas that we see. So I think the developer intends to price them under $300,000. You know, that's up to them and what the market will pay for them, but I think that's their goal. And I'm sure the applicant can speak better to what the market is that they're going after than I can.
Would the applicant like to speak on item number 6?
Good evening, Commission. Justin Dodge, Hunsliker Companies, 105 South 16th Street. Greatly appreciate all the time and effort that Eloise and Kelley have put into this project. This is outside the box, even for us. We hear frequently around town that I can't believe how much everything costs. It just costs so much. And then we also hear everything looks the same. They're all the same. All the houses look the same on all the streets. And so we're really trying to address both those problems. We have been listening, and So this is a creative solution. We had tried the townhomes in 2016. We're working on the last fourplex right now. They did not sell near as quickly as we had hoped. And so we're trying to shift gears and see if this is a better product for the market. So Hunzikers will be developing the 15 lots and then right away selling them to Destiny Homes, who has had quite a bit of success in the Des Moines metro area with the Smart Series home. And so introducing this into the market to see what happens. To get to your question, John, Destiny has indicated if we can keep the lot price where we think we're going to be at, they believe that they can sell these homes for about $220,000 for brand new construction. So if you look at the price of construction, we believe that's very competitive given the cost of materials and labor costs these days. Let's see. You know, with a PRD, there's always trade-offs. There's, you know, pros and cons. And so one of the flexible terms that the PRD allows is the smaller lot sizes that aren't allowed in our regular zoning code. And so getting these lot sizes smaller so that way we can fit a few more units on is one of the benefits. One of the other benefits is a narrower street. And so we're trying to maximize some of those benefits. Now on the other side of a PRD, we've got to reserve 40% for open space. And so we're combining that with an existing recreational area within the subdivision. So there's always trade-offs. And so the street width was one of the trade-offs that we made. Ultimately, if you guys decide that we have to add it on, so be it. But that's a cost that's going to have to go directly from, you know, the cost of construction onto the price of the home. So we believe that we have accommodated plenty of not street parking, but plenty of parking. If you factor in a 2-car garage and then 36 feet of driveway length, yeah, it'd be difficult to get 4, you know, full-size trucks on there. But take, for instance, my wife's Jeep Grand Cherokee, you could easily fit 4 of those in a 36-foot long driveway, you know, stacked 2 and 2. So if you think about it, there's 6 parking stalls there. The bedroom or each home has 2 or 3 bedrooms. So 6 parking stalls for 3 bedrooms seems ample. But ultimately, it's your call if you want us to add on 3 more parking stalls. But like I said, we're trying to think outside the box, trying to be creative, trying to bring new things to the marketplace, and excited to be moving forward with this one. Any questions anybody has for me? I can't speak directly for the builder, but I will answer any questions about the buildings to the best of my ability.
What you're saying is you don't see the need for the cutouts or the additional space for on-street parking.
We would prefer not to, but it's your call and it's city council's call. If you'd like us to add those in, we can, but the trade-off is that it gets added on to the cost of the home, and we're trying to keep that cost low.
Relatively low.
We're trying to keep new construction costs
low. 225 is extremely low cost
for new construction.
It just is.
Blindingly low.
Yeah. We're doing everything we can to get it down, John. Yep.
I guess I'm just curious because I have seen these homes in person in other like parts of the metro.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did notice, because the spacing is so close together, typically then the mechanical equipment or like the AC units seem like they were pretty tight fit in between the spaces. And do you know where they might be proposing those units at all?
I don't, Ruth, but
Okay.
So some of the ones that I've been to have even tighter side yard setbacks to the tune of 4 feet on each lot. And then, so you've only got 8 feet in between the different homes. And so instead of doing that, we opted for 6 feet, which is our standard for residential low density in Ames.
Okay.
So we hope that there's enough room. I mean,
Right.
given that we're complying, our regular single family house would be at for side yard setbacks.
Do you know, like, what sort of mix of these three styles they're actually planning to build?
So that was one of the things, and we really appreciate staff's flexibility on this. Because typically with PRD, we have to know all the floor plans for that particular lot and have to have the elevation for each particular lot and that floor plan. And so staff has been very flexible with us and Destiny Homes to allow any one of the 4 floor plans on any one of the 15 lots. And then I forget how many different elevation options they have for the different floor plans, but they could go anywhere and they could intermix however the home buyer wants them to be. And Destiny has a system that is, it would take us a long time to replicate it. And that's why we're turning this over to them to build. But they have it down to a science where they know in order to make any money on it, they have to build at least 3 of them at a time to get their subs on the job site and to just keep clicking through. That's how precise they are when it comes to their construction.
Will these be built as, it's probably not the right term, but as spec homes or not until they have buyers for them?
I believe it's going to be a mix of both, Carol.
Okay.
So will that, since there's no limitation in terms of, say, if you have a homeowner and 3 of them all decide on the same elevation plan right next to each other? I mean,
hopefully they'll mix it up with some colors or some different stone treatments or whatever the options are. I personally wouldn't want my home looking exactly like my other neighbor. Even though I have lived in a house like that where, you'd pull in the wrong driveway if you had too many beers. But hopefully we don't have that problem here.
okay.
I was told that because, like in this case here that's on the screen, there's the same floor plan with 3 different elevations because of the roof line change,
Right.
as well as different color variations. So I was told that even if somebody wanted the same floor plan, they would make sure that the builder would make sure that the elevation wasn't replicated, that it would look diverse.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that they've got in place a toolbox to do that.
Okay. You're right, those townhomes aren't working.
We tried. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, and
Well, you had bad neighbors to the west too, though.
we did the best we could, John, and now we're shifting gears to see if there's another product type out there. All right. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Justin. Commission discussion.
My sense is that this is a niche in the market that we haven't really addressed as a city, and that it might be quite attractive to younger first home buyers or folks that want a newer home but are willing to deal with less yard. I'd be very supportive of the concept. I think it's a small enough project. There's not a huge risk. There's some, but I think it's something that might be very attractive in our market.
The only thing I guess don't care about, but first of all, the designs are, the roof lines are rather unique on some of them, but I guess I don't see the need for on alley parking or whatever you want, private street parking. I guess I'd agree with the developer rather than for the on-street parking. Because I'd rather have a nice driveway that people could park in, that, because I got a short driveway. But I think more driveway would be more useful for up to the developer. Bigger selling point, I guess.
Actually, if they add 2 feet of pavement to the street all the way down, then the driveway will actually be an extra, it'll be 18 feet instead of 16 feet. So they'll have even greater
On the east side,
on the east side,
not on the west side, though.
unless they want to split it. But that would be, yeah, I guess that wouldn't work for the parking.
I guess I appreciate it from a design perspective that we are not looking at garages when you're on a public street like Wilder. That to me is like a big change, which we don't see enough in the city. You all mostly have those, what you call as snout houses, where you have the garage occupying most of your front facade. So in that sense, I think design-wise, definitely appreciate the private street side loading of garages. Having said that, because Wilder is a public street that does not allow on-street parking, I see that the wider driveway would probably accommodate maybe 3 vehicles, but you're also talking about maybe a younger demographic that would occupy some of these houses. If I'm entertaining, I usually have at least 5 or 7 cars at a minimum coming to my house one evening, which means I have to accommodate more than just what the 2 cars on the driveway would allow for. So if you don't have parking on Wilder side, you need to have some form of parking option on the private street, because otherwise, based on the way the circulation is right now, you're expecting some of this overflow parking to happen on Durant, and then you walk either from the east side, or that pedestrian walking circulation is a separate issue. But I think we do need to accommodate for some of that spillover parking that might occur in these areas. So I would actually support what staff is recommending as a condition. Even the 3 parking spaces may not be enough, I feel. But again, like you said, Carol, it's a small enough, almost sort of an experiment to see how it works. And it's probably something to try out for sure.
I agree with you on the east side. If they do it on the west side, they'll end up losing driveway space, correct?
I think we've outlaid a way that you don't have to change driveway depth. Whether that's how the applicant would want to do it or not, our condition is open, make the road 26 feet wide. So does it, and we're saying allow for the house to move if they desire to keep the driveway depth the same. That's how we've written the condition. So they haven't given us a plan to say that's the best way to do it or how to do it, because they're requesting not to have to do that condition.
Because you've given enough flexibility on placement of the house on the lot.
In our opinion, yes. Our intent is to accommodate the wider street without affecting the lot layout as they have proposed it up until now.
But the setback on Wilder you have, is that
that's
the minimum, is it?
On Wilder, I think it's 25 feet, which is the minimum, and we wouldn't push anything towards Wilder. The space to make up that doesn't affect anybody is on the east side of the
Correct.
site.
But you're not going to move the whole street in the lots.
It could be done that way. All I'm saying is that there are ways to do it without changing the depth of driveways and without reviewing a drawing. I can't tell you how the best way for them to do that or the way they would prefer to do it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Somebody entertain a motion. Make a motion.
I would make a motion to approve staff recommendation with alternative 1.
I would second that.
With both
Both
parts A and B. It's been moved and seconded, alternative one, that we, the Planning and Zoning Commission, recommend to council to approve the following request at 130 Wilder Avenue, Part A, amend planned residential district with a base zone residential medium density to include 15 detached single-family housing units, and approve the major site development plan subject to approval of a preliminary and final plat for creation of proposed residential lots as depicted on site plan. Amend the site layout and street design to accommodate street parking. Is that right? Moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so this item is going to move forward to the city council next week for review of your recommendation.
This next item is the preliminary plat for the same development, known as Sunset Ridge Subdivision 9th Edition. So it's the part to the right that you're seeing. It's, as we mentioned, it's 3.73 acres. This just kind of establishes the preliminary plat so they can proceed with making plans, and then the final plat would then go to the council once they move through construction and sales further. So there again, they're including street trees, which is required as part of the subdivision standards on the zoning within the municipal code. And meeting the public improvements required. So there's open space and sidewalks, pedestrian connections. They've dealt with their infrastructure and stormwater management. And in both cases, we have noticed the property owners within 200 feet. We've received 2 inquiries, but no objections to this or to the previous one either. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So clearly this is a companion item, but what's important here is what you're really authorizing because of the PRD is the allowance for the private street. That's the subdivision code modification that is what the plat's doing, that what you just saw on the site plan previously. So you need both approvals to do what it is, but this is technically where the private street approval comes in, not the last project.
Any questions for staff on this? Does the applicant want to speak on? Further discussion? Somebody want to make a motion? One, we recommend to council to approve the preliminary plat for Sunset Ridge Subdivision 9th Edition, subject to conformance to the design requirements of the PRD amendment major site development plan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Passes.
While Julie's getting set up, I'll start to introduce this next item if you want to read off what it is.
Item number 7, adaptive reuse plan amendment to construct a new 7,745 square foot building at 2801 North Grand Avenue.
So Julie will go through the specifics of the project. I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of adaptive reuse plan. It is not something that we see very often. Really, I think the mall and also the Roosevelt are probably the only two in the last 10 years of sites that have taken advantage of this. So this was a tool that the city created for really unique conditions to kind of treat the site kind of like a PUD, where you get flexibility, recognizing the existing conditions would make it difficult to meet full code requirements. So the mall has a long history of looking at redevelopment or additional development options from the late 2000s to what was really amended into this 2012 plan, which allowed for the Kohl's building to be built and replace the Sears building. Obviously, other buildings were changed at that same time. So the adaptive reuse plan, we're recognizing the economic importance of the site. We want to see reinvestment in the site and support what's there. And this is the method to do that through the major site plan. So in this case, because this building is a small building, but it's not fundamentally changing the plan, it is just an amendment to the approved plan. And although there are different properties out here, the whole mall site, including the Kohl's, all the way from the north to the south boundary is one permit. So there's multiple owners under one permit. It's collective parking, it's collective access. That's all been sorted out and agreed to as part of the original approval. So this project is really just focused on this northeast corner of the site. And we're not revisiting the majority of the site and looking at what other things could be done to the site, made better or change. We're just focusing on this corner as an amendment to what was done previously. And last thing I'll say then, so when the original, or I shouldn't say the original, when the 2012 version was approved, there was a pad set aside in this corner for a sit-down restaurant. Now, it wasn't vetted to the level of knowing that it was constructible. It was just said a pad is here for a restaurant. The applicant is pursuing a different version of that. It's slightly different size, and it's definitely a different use, and it's just a reconfiguration of that corner. So then, again, what we're looking at is basically the reconfiguration of this area with this front parking lot in front of JCPenney with this building rather than a pad building that was previously authorized. It was just different than this. So that's where we're coming from as staff. And with that, Julie will walk you through the specifics of the proposal and our recommendation.
We'll start out just to give you a little more location context. This is the intersection of 30th and Grand. This is JCPenney's, and so the proposed amendment area is just this northeast corner. Currently, like the Holub seasonal stand and the snow cone place is located there. I don't know what makes more sense, if Grand is to the east or at the top of the page or to the left, but this is north is up. So the applicant is proposing a 3-tenant, it could be up to 3 tenants, 7,745 square foot building. They are going to reconfigure the parking in this area to accommodate, right now all of the parking aisles run east-west, and so this removes those rows of parking for this pad site and then adds parking around the site. There are 2 drive-throughs lanes proposed on the south side. This one, if you look in the recommendations and the conditions that are included in that, this one is recommended to be pickup only. So there won't be a menu board. It will be order online or call ahead and pick up at the window only. So you really shouldn't see much stacking in this aisle. Typically, we like to see room for 5 cars at the menu board. So this one's a little bit shorter than we normally like to see or allow in a drive-through scenario. The north one will be a true drive-through. The menu board is proposed at this northeast corner of the site. This is a patio area. And then the pickup window is located probably about as far west as it could get to allow as much stacking as possible. Like I said, typically we like to see 5 stalls from the menu board. So that would be in this area. So with that and how that affects the adaptive reuse plan, there's changes to parking, obviously, how the site circulates, and landscaping for the most part. In the staff report to address the circulation issues with the drive-through, we We included comments that we were concerned about the ability to stack and how much room there was, and that this should be restricted to one-way traffic circulation around the site to allow for stacking and cars to pass. Since the staff report has been written and posted, the applicant and the representatives have sent us an alternative plan to hopefully be able to keep that two-way traffic in that area. And what it does is it essentially reduces that patio area, and then you still get a 12-foot drive aisle lane. I have a sketch of it. So you would still get 12 feet of drive-through all the way here, the painted median, 24 drive aisle, which allows for two-way traffic access, and then our required 18-foot depth parking stalls. So by reducing the patio, they think that they can accommodate a drive-through stacking lane and be able to keep that as two-way traffic. There could be with this plan concern about a conflict of stacking extending even further out and maybe conflicting with the cars pulling out in this area, but these medians are painted, so there's no curb that would prevent somebody for keep them stuck in the lane if that would become an issue. The parking on the site, so to kind of give you an overview, we can go into all the details if you want, because there's a lot of numbers included in the staff report that kind of explain the calculation. So with the adaptive reuse plan in 2012, they assigned a 4 stalls per 1,000 square feet parking ratio across the entire site. That's not typical. We always have it's based on use type. So there would be a different ratio typically for a drive-through, for a standalone restaurant, for a shop, for a retail building. So when you work out, so they'll remove parking, they'll leave a little parking to install this, to develop this building. There is a long-term plan, which was attachment D in your staff report, to restripe this area. And by restriping it and reconfiguring that a little bit, they do get more parking than what's there today, because they're not exactly, they're not perfectly painted parking lines today. So we'll get more parking in than what you presently see in this area today. So with that, when the building is built, this north parking area in front of JCPenney's will go from 427 parking stalls to 365 parking stalls. When these improvements are made, which there is no trigger at this point with this staff report or with this approval to force those, but when that restriping plan is done, there will be a slight increase in parking again to 385 stalls. So then when you take the change in parking with this and this restriping plan, and then look at what's there today and what will be there in the future in the overall mall, what was originally required in 2012 was 1,753 parking stalls. And what you will get, or no, that's what you will get with this plan. And what was originally called for was 1,784. That does reduce the overall ratio to less than 4 per 1,000, just so you have some context. So it does reduce the overall parking ratio and the overall available parking. With the landscaping, we applied. So they had a waiver from the code in 2012 with the approved landscaping plan then. And since then, our standard landscaping plan has changed as well. So we applied our front yard and current regulations to front yard and parking lot landscaping to kind of get a feel for what would be required if this was a standalone pad site. We included in table so you can see what was approved in 2012 with what they're proposing. One of the conditions of approval would be to just make, these are all proposed as ornamental trees, and we would just want to see, 3 overstory trees in these front yard area. So change 3 ornamentals to front yard. And then with the restriping plan, there would be room to, there'll be additional islands added, so there'll be room for more parking lot trees. And if possible, we could probably add one here and here if we needed to, excuse me, here, if we needed to add more parking lot trees. Along with this plan, there will be some immediate improvements to this area of the parking lot. So this row will be restriped, this row will be restriped, and there will be a 7-foot sidewalk that's put in from Grand to towards the entrance of the mall. So this will be done at the same time this building is, these improvements are made if approved. So I can answer any questions that you have. Staff is recommending alternative one, which has 5 conditions of approval. One is the circulation from one way. So that's kind of open to discussion with, since there's a new plan proposed that would allow adequate room for two-way traffic. B is to allow that reduced rate of parking lower than 4 per thousand. And C is the trees that we discussed. And D is also landscaping related. And then E is to ensure this window stays pickup only. We would require a note to be placed on the site plan for that. So with that, I can answer any questions you might have.
I have just a point of clarification. So it sounds like the staff recommendation, you all agree with more or less with the proposed landscaping plan, though it doesn't meet the current standards,
correct,
so to speak. Just with the modification of these overstory trees, which would be along Grand.
It'd be 30th and Grand.
Okay.
It'd be where they fit appropriately on those 2 street frontages.
Okay. Okay.
So the plan on it's not exactly what was done in the other areas, but if you look in front of from Walgreens up to Fazoli's, there were landscape enhancements done with the new construction in that area. It was a combination of our older L1 standards, which was grouping of shrubs with a tree. So the design on the Grand Avenue side is similar to that, which exists further to the south. And then they did take the approach to use grasses, I think, on 30th Street, which is obviously a compatible thing because we require both now, not just one. And so it's right. It doesn't meet code. It could have more. It has a little bit smaller yard area than we would typically have now. So those standards that we have are expecting a 10-foot yard area. They're proposing 5. And so it's kind of it's kind of a mix of how we used to do things versus a little bit of how we do things now. And we think it's okay.
They're proposing 5 because they're not changing. They're not excavating in that area. They're not taking out, doing any type of demo to the existing pavement in that area. So that curb will stay at 5.
The one thing that's significantly different from code is how you would maybe look at parking lot trees within the actual parking lot. As we talked about, the overall parking plan will never be compliant with current code. Even when they do the restriping, they will add some islands, which will be a nice addition to the ends of those. But there's no expectation of coming back in here and adding dozens of trees throughout the parking lot, as would be required under our current code.
Would there be any point where that would be triggered and necessary?
Not with this approval. So with this if this is approved, this is the standard they would have to build to.
Just for this corner?
For this corner.
But future changes might result.
So the rest of the mall with the area north of JCPenney's and to the back of the mall, that was just always shown as is. There was no specific changes planned or shown or requested for any of those areas. If something different was to happen there, we'd have to look at whether it's an audit and then consider what can be done to improve those areas.
So if the existing site does decide to redo pavement, typically, isn't there an amount that then would trigger essentially bringing it up to code, generally speaking?
So if this was not adaptive reuse,
Right.
then yes, if you were to rebuild the parking lot, the area that you are reconstructing would be expected to meet code to the extent practicable. Now, the wrinkle here would be that if we're saying you need 1,707 parking spaces on the site, and they have 1,707, it's not practicable then to lose those spaces. So that's how that would work out. Now, if there's extra space, then yes, landscaping can be done. It's like when they restripe this, they have inefficiency in how they have driveway aisles. That's why they can add spaces and manipulate things. So if other areas were to redevelop and it didn't affect the total parking count, then it could have landscaping added. But when we set the bar that you have to have a certain number of parking spaces, then I don't have the authority to go below on the parking to add something else. So that's why it's probably really speculative to say what would happen in any of the other parking fields on the site besides what we're seeing here tonight.
What, just maybe I'm missing this, the total reduction in spaces is like 30, 31? So
I think the best explanation is when you look at on page 2.
Yeah.
It's those two paragraphs lead you through kind of the change from existing conditions to both what would be in existence, which would be 1687 when this is built. And then with the restriping plan and the additional islands, it would go up by 20 spaces to 1707.
Okay.
And that was staff calculating the changes for this area, but assuming everything else that was on the 2012 plan was accurate.
Okay.
So that's how we got to this number.
Let's see, total mall parking minus.
So that would be the 17. So correct. The 1707 is every at this point. That's the Kohl's, that's the mall. It does not include Walgreens because Walgreens was not part of the plan in 2012. It's split off of its own lot. There is common access between it, obviously, but those spaces were not included in 2012.
Okay.
Staff, sorry, Kelly.
So just the ratio, I think, when we calculate it out, is around 3.83 per thousand, I think, with what we have. So it's less than a 5% reduction in ratio from what it was before.
Anything further for staff? The applicant like to speak on the issue?
Zach Ludwig, Havercanton Properties, 4720 Mortonson Road, Ames. Thanks for considering this tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Currently, there's not a big parking need at the mall. There's a lot of vacant space. I'm sure the owners would love for that to be a need someday, but currently it's not. So we want to try and get this building built to get some space that someone wants to lease. Any questions I can answer?
Go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm just curious, just based on the current layout that you guys are proposing, my only concern, especially with the vehicle stacking and the patio being on the back end, you have folks sitting there and you have exhaust fumes from cars kind of just hanging out. Did you guys consider a different building design, pushing the patio, or excuse me, putting the patio maybe on the front of the building and then?
Well, the side that we have the patio on, we consider it's kind of a two-sided face building. So both sides are the front. Best layout to achieve that drive-through. Our concern with the one-way traffic on the east side would be drivers who are coming in from the west, coming around the north side, would hit a dead end, more or less, where they couldn't continue around the building and have to figure out how to turn around. That seemed kind of cumbersome to us, so we thought a good compromise would be to to lessen the size of that patio and have the drive-through there.
How wide would the patio then on the back be? It kind of shifting to a two-way.
You know, Scott?
I'll scale it out to 14.
Could potentially have tables sitting up right alongside where people are driving if they're stacking back that far.
We would try to avoid that and keep the tables closer to the building, I think.
This is going to be 3 separate.
Well, that's what we're proposing. We don't have any tenants in mind, or we haven't leased it out. So that could change to 2. Kind of depends what needs any tenant may have.
Well, it seems like the pickup only window suggests a certain kind of use.
Mostly we didn't want to limit to not having it and then have to come back through P&Z again. But I believe the ownership has talked to, or at least had the idea of whether it's a delivery driver coming and picking up pizza at Domino's or someone placing a phone order and just picking it up, to have that option to make it more desirable for a tenant to take that space. Clearly there's not enough room for 2 drive-throughs, so
we're
trying to work with what we can.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks. Commission discussion?
I guess I just have some concerns, obviously, about the current layout and the way that they're looking then to run 2 drive-throughs, specifically the obviously drive-through on the north and the stacking back and having those right next to the patio. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that, but if I were sitting out on a patio, I don't know that I'd want to sit there with the car exhaust fumes kind of hanging out.
I would agree with you. However, the market will probably dictate whether that patio gets used.
Yeah.
It may just be a bad idea to have a patio there, but we're not really, we can't really get into that, I don't think, with this, can we? This is still seems pretty speculative.
Well, I think my opinion is that you would want a plan that does have a patio. I think that's a more valuable attribute of the concept than just encasing it with parking and saying don't hang out outside. I don't think that's good for the project. I don't think that's good for likely customers. Some people might not prefer to be by that. I don't know that. I know what you're saying. I don't know how many people are going to be affected by that or find it to be a negative and make it an unwelcoming space. I think the only concern would be if it's designed in an unwelcoming way and it just looks plain empty and then it starts to look like a detraction to the project. That would be when we would say, hey, we want a patio here. I think our position is that they should have a patio and they should have the ability to it's at least 15 feet. I think they should have enough space to not feel uncomfortable in proximity to a car that might be sitting there. That's probably in the eye of the beholder a little bit. 25 feet is quite a bit of space. If that was the space, I would not have concern because you could easily have tables 10, 15 feet back.
Well, and that was I had less concern when the patio was a little bit wider, but if they're anticipating they want to do, and I can understand why they'd want to do a 2-way in there and then narrow that patio. So, but yeah, like Carlton said, obviously we'll see potentially.
That alternative 1 is the one-way streets?
A.
Correct. So not having fully vetted what was shown to us this afternoon, our position was that site could be exactly as it is if you just striped it for one-way circulation and there's no change in any of the dimensions. You could do other things. You could make angled parking so it's very clear that it's one way. We didn't go that far in our recommendation. We were okay with the 90-degree parking and didn't think it had to be modified. It could just be arrows. and signage that directed people that way. That's our recommendation as number one.
I love the idea of working in that corner and sort of getting something going in that corner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not totally sold on the design, unfortunately. To me, that side on Grand and facades for that building, I would almost want to see more. I know we're not necessarily cannot ask for a complete change in design, but it's almost, I mean, that drive, I feel like that's a lost opportunity when you have a pickup and that drive through on the 30th side and you're stacking cars on the Grand too. You'd almost want to make that more usable to people outside. And to me, even having more parking in there doesn't make any sense because the parking lot in the entire mall is so underutilized at this point in time. But especially on the north side and on the east side, along 30th and Grand, I almost want to make it, we want to have more public sitting out there, have more patio, more visibility from the street, reduce some of that parking along Grand and along 30th, maybe pull that back. It's almost like talking, I know it's too late, it's not like talking design options necessarily, but I love the idea of reinvigorating that area, that corner, but that design layout just doesn't.
That was my first thought, was pulling the building to the corner and creating an actual urban corner where you wouldn't have any cars between the building and the street. You'd have a big, I mean, you could have a huge patio or something. Sure. Not anybody wants to look out at Grand, but who knows?
Yeah, but you throw in landscaping, you throw in trees there, then it starts really doing something to that intersection.
I hear you. I kind of went back and forth because you look down the rest of the street and the pattern is sort of already set, and would this reset the pattern? Maybe. You
have to start somewhere.
Right.
This is an opportunity now.
You're right.
You don't know what is in the future of the mall going forward.
You're right.
But taking away the opportunity for drive-throughs also limits the leasability of the facility.
I agree with that.
That's the conflict.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily, I'm not against the drive-through necessarily. I think, and I
But if we suggest moving it too close to the corner, then it's much more difficult to talk about a drive-through opportunity. That's all I'm saying. Not saying you couldn't do it, but it would make it more difficult.
No, I agree with you. I think you need to have the option of a drive-through possibility there. It's just trying to figure out, are there any other ways through design to facilitate that so that it doesn't go the route or that circulation pattern that it's doing right now.
I hear you.
But you're anticipating entrances on both sides of the building?
Right. So I think, so that anticipating they would have to have entrances, whether it's 2 or 3 or 1 space, that's not required, but they would have to have the ability to, it'd have to be a transparent or an open both ways based on the plan that we're looking at. They can't take away features of the plan after it's approved. They're just not obligated to have 3 tenants.
I feel by doing this, you're almost locking in the kind of tenants or the kind of options that you would have in there.
And how much leeway do we have to suggest that kind of a radical change in the site plan?
I mean, you can recommend a lot of things. It's adaptive reuse planning and it's an amendment. So if you think the basis is the 2012 approval, there was a sit-down restaurant pad surrounded by parking is what was approved here. So from that person, so that's what was approved. Now you can see that was not thought out. That was just put there. So this is in the same location. It still has parking. Really, the only difference is that it has drive-through functionality that was not anticipated. So adding drive-throughs is part of the amendment. So that's kind of brings it up to your discussion and your recommendation, because adding the drive-through use is part of the amendment.
So we could say, we think that parking should be removed from between the building and the street as part of this. If say a motion were to be made like that.
So what you're saying is pull the parking off of Grand and off of 30th Street and move the building closer a little bit, but leave.
Not sure how far.
But leave the street, the drive-through area even.
The drive-through could be reconfigured. I mean, they would have to be, but just to eliminate.
In that concept, when you play that out, you're aligning the street with the drive-through. It's the only way to do what you're saying and allow for a drive-through. So the drive-through would wrap the building. That's what would be between the building and the street.
Yeah.
Not if you.
You have to drive. Well,
Yeah.
You have to have the pickup window on the left.
Keep the pickup
You
window.
have to go counterclockwise around the site. You just.
What,
You could. The only other thing to do would be chew up a huge amount of space to go up and back around to a left,
like
to a west side drive-through window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know they have the maneuvering area for something like that on this tight of corner. So we're guessing right now. I guess if that's
Right.
hypothetical.
where you went, we didn't investigate that. I don't think the applicant investigated that either. I know what you're asking for. You're trying to set the corner, allow for a drive-through that doesn't interrupt the corner presence, has the patio space, face south, and
Yes, that does exist.
it can be
Many
done.
places.
I think the question is how a drive-through would circulate and make that work. I don't think the pickup window option would be viable though, because they would only have the one side
Then
instead of two.
One of those would probably have to go.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because the way it's laid out right now, you're basically allowing, if you were to go with 3 tenants, then only the tenant on the extreme north end would be able to have a drive-through, right? Because that's the pickup. I know we are almost sitting here and designing your site for you, and I apologize. But if you're,
The whole building back.
like, if you had, I don't know where you are in the process and if you are still open to thinking some of these options through. But almost like Kelly mentioned, it's on the west side almost. If you do something like a U, almost, so that you have a pickup window for all 3 tenants. You're pushing your building further up on the northeast side. You're still utilizing your north and your east with patio,
Sure.
with landscaping, huge windows looking into the Grand Avenue
Yeah.
traffic. I don't know, whatever.
I understand
But
what you're saying.
then you're pushing your traffic, you're pushing your parking all behind, further away from public view. So when you're driving down Grand, when you're driving down 30, you're just seeing this welcoming, hopefully 3 welcoming restaurants or
Yes.
1 or whatever it is. And all of your parking and your pickup and everything is happening on the west side of the building.
Sure. We have put a lot of thought into this and talked to the people who are leasing it and what people are looking for. We wouldn't have the intention of all 3 being restaurants. We've worked very hard to maintain parking spaces, even though we don't necessarily need them now. It's important for the overall plan that we still maintain as many parking spaces as possible, because someday it could be a problem. So we worked hard to keep the parking spaces at the maximum they can and still build this building. So to do a circle loop, excuse me, or something like that to accommodate a drive-through and lose, I don't know how many spaces over there, 20 spaces. I don't see that as a wise move on our part, and I don't think you guys would want us to do that either.
I would love for you to eliminate 1,000 parking spaces.
I don't think
Frankly,
Kelly would.
There's way too many as it is,
Yeah.
and the future is not parking, right?
Right.
So, it's, to me, losing 20, that's 1,700. No one would even notice.
No, you're talking about losing the ones on Grand.
I don't think we know
Yeah.
what's lost.
Right. I don't think
With
that's
what's
the direction we
speculation.
want to go down.
Yes.
So in this particular circumstance, which is completely unique because of adaptive reuse, we can set the parking standard. If it was any other situation, you would have to be minimum code. But I don't know that we could tell you if they're losing 7 spaces an idea or 17 or 37 spaces, because no one's drawn it to see what happens.
Right.
But that is an option. You could look into the possibility of working with the reduced parking, if that were to be the case.
Yeah, any spaces shown is what can be approved on the site. right? So in this case, we're going from a ratio of 4 to 3.83. So if you lose 20 more, you go to a ratio of 3.8. I mean, it's about what ratio are we going to apply for tenanting purposes. It's not about meeting a minimum code standard. We get to set the code standard here.
I agree with Carlton that we need to make the Grand Avenue side at least more attractive. That's what you're trying to say, right?
I mean, yeah, I think this is Anu's main point at the beginning, but yes. I think we're all kind of in agreement there. I don't know exactly how to design it sitting here, but yes. It's a potential corner, right? Because it's sort of an entryway into the city. It's been an eyesore for a while. You guys know this. I mean, it's not a beautiful entryway. Granted, there's a Walmart there already. So
here are the building elevations. So just to go back to what's proposed. So the front of the building, Julie, is which one of these?
Well, this would be, one of these would be facing Grand, one of these would be facing Penny's, the Penny side. This is let's see, this is northeast, this is northwest. So this would be from like the intersection of 30th and Grand looking towards the building. And then this would be like if you were further west on 30th looking towards the building. And then this is southwest and southeast. So this is your pickup window only side. And this is your drive-through window side. It's really dark on. Make the light any better.
So I think from an architectural perspective, I mean, they have a front of the building towards Grand. I don't think our comment as staff is that the aesthetics facing Grand are inadequate. So that's not where we were coming from in reviewing this. I think that they have put a front to the building and they have fronts on both sides to make it work with the layout that they have.
But again, to make it clear in our minds, number one is a one-way street around the building.
Only on the Grand side of the building. They would keep two-way functionality on the west and the north. It would just be the east side of the building would be striped and signed to be one way because of the queuing. And that would be with the larger patio. So
but
it doesn't.
Stripe that side one way, that whole area is one way.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's all designed as 90-degree parking. Everywhere else you could back up and go left or right to leave. It's not a one-way counterclockwise circulation system.
Just in this stretch.
That would be the only stretch that has to be one way.
I'm reworking the layout. It's.
So I think
put that into our motion. The drawing.
So I think you're not asked to redesign the site. You're asked to make a recommendation of whether the proposal is approvable. Obviously, you can recommend conditions and other attributes to a site, but I don't think you're, in this case, asked to generate a new site plan. So I think and obviously there's leeway there because if you don't want to approve the site plan, that's because you want something else. But I don't think that I don't think the commission can go down the route of saying, I want to redesign the site and do it this way, and that's my recommendation. I think you could maybe ask for exploring something or be very specific about a change. And I think that's kind of the limits of what your role is at this point in time on the project.
So I mean, in theory, we could defer action and ask for some reconsideration.
That's alternative 4.
Yeah.
And I think I would ask the applicant as to how open they are to maybe looking at the site again, both in terms of the site layout and also in terms of the design and what frontages look like from, say, 30th Street and from Grand Avenue.
Yeah, I can't speak to the owner. As the applicant, a lot of energy and effort's gone into getting this plan together, and we've worked really hard to make the building elevations attractive from all 4 sides of the building, which is quite difficult to do, to not have a back of the building. So we wouldn't be real excited about starting over the site. We would look for your recommendation for the one-way street, or to reduce the patio size and keep it 2-way, two-way driveway around the building.
How tight's your timetable?
We would like to get started this fall, so we don't have a lot of before it would put us into spring.
It's tricky.
It is. I mean, part of me says, we don't get this opportunity that often.
Right.
We should think carefully. And this is not sort of against what you guys have proposed, but just, it's going to be there for a while. And we got them all, 40 years ago. It's still there.
Kind of.
Kind of. But I mean, some of the buildings are still there. And so, do you take this opportunity to kind of push back a little bit and say, is there something slightly, maybe 20% better, maybe 50% better? I don't know. I mean, my tendency is to want to say that. Let's think about it a little more before we.
That's my thought too. Like, I definitely understand. I know there's tight timelines and whatnot in terms of development, but I also think to myself, if a handful of us on the commission have hesitation in terms of the layout, essentially, of the project that's proposed, I mean, that's going to billow out to the rest of the community too. So, I mean, it's like whether or not you want to get a really great design or if you just want to get a, okay design and move forward with it. So I guess I'm kind of one that would, especially with this being, I feel like a prominent area kind of on the north end of town, would love to see a great thing going here. But I understand tight timelines.
Sure. Short of the stacking of the cars, I haven't heard specific critique. Is that?
I do think the addition of the trees, both understory and the larger trees, will soften the look in ways that don't show in the elevations that are put forward here. To what extent that addresses some of the aesthetics of other commission members, I don't know, but I think for me that would help it. And it's not going to be overnight because you just can't snap your fingers and make those trees grow. But I do think that would soften the look. I'm not sure how much change you can do. I kind of like the elevations themselves if they were softened by appropriate landscaping.
But Carlton, you're saying you'd rather not look at cars on Grand? Excuse me, the cars on Grand would not like to see cars for the lot.
Yeah, so this is a
aesthetic.
It's a small step toward removing the distance between building and street. Like we have this pattern, it's all over the place, where the buildings are set behind a sea of parking. I think that was once the state of the art, as we all know, way to plan. It's not anymore. We're moving in new directions pretty quickly in a lot of parts of the country. And so this is a fairly prominent corner, but not the most. The future of the mall, of course, that whole facility may ultimately be reshaped. And so the point is not the elevations of the building. I mean, the architecture, that may or may not end up looking like those renderings, but how you set that corner or sort of establish that corner with the side of the building sort of sets a tone for future, right? So you're kind of setting a pattern that may get replicated again and again as we go down the street, as this mall.
Right. I guess I agree with you, what you're saying, but how do we do it?
Well, I mean, I think the simplest thing, based on what Kelley said, we'd ask them to come back with defer it and come back with a revised version.
Number 4.
That would take into account perhaps some of the comments that we've made. I think. I don't know. Kelley can give us some guidance here.
I mean, you can request it. They don't have to do that. So you could make a choice to defer it to the next meeting. and ask for the applicant to propose another plan, they would not be obligated to do that. And then you would have to render a decision on the proposed plan.
Could they still go to council with the existing plan if we defer?
You have to make a recommendation before it can go to council.
Okay. So if our recommendation is to defer it, it's tabled until it comes back to.
It's tabled until your next meeting. Now there's a limit on how long you can defer things for. It's not indefinitely. But if it's one meeting, that's within the code allowances.
So I guess I would ask you again, putting you in a spot, I understand. But if the commission today were to take option 4, where we would maybe ask you to look at some of the comments, things that has been discussed today, take it back and maybe try and see both design and layout wise, if there's something you can do a little more creative thinking for another meeting cycle, would that be something you would be open to?
I would be glad to present that to the owners.
Okay. That's fair. And I want to state for the record that I think it's the idea of redeveloping the site is really positive. Mm-hmm. So don't take this as meaning we don't want to. Right. I think this is a good infill. Just tweaking the design. That's all. This boils for me at least.
Not that we don't like Hullabs, but it just needs something for the gateway, and it is a gateway into the city.
So to understand you clearly, it's the elevations of the building.
The building. I don't think the building itself we have a problem with. Okay. It's just what does it look like from the streets? Correct.
I guess what I'm hearing, I think it's the orientation of the drive-through. It's not the architecture of the building.
Right.
You're trying to use the same architecture, create a desirable outdoor space that is not surrounded by a drive-through. That is what I was interpreting from the variety of comments, and that's.
I agree with that. At the same time, if you are going to take the time, that one meeting cycle to address those concerns, I would throw in one more piece is the 30th Street facade. What you're looking from Grand Avenue looks fantastic. I think something like that. I mean, if you're wrapping that around 30th, it creates a much more it creates a greater visual appeal. So when if and how you start looking at the design process, maybe that is something I would look at just to wrap around that facade on both 30th and Grand.
Like to see something as you're going up Grand. I want to stop in there.
Like windows.
Yeah, and that would be my hope with shifting maybe the patio or the back end closer to the street, is that people would see folks sitting out there kind of enjoying themselves instead of like cars stacked up driving through that area.
Like Westtown Pub off of South Dakota.
I can't quite visualize that, but the patio.
Right behind
the patio, you could see it
Yeah.
from.
See the patio.
Yeah.
As you're coming down that street, you're looking.
Okay.
South Dakota, you're looking at people out on a patio enjoying their food, or except in December and February. But that's Iowa.
Yeah, and that's why we put the patio on the east side rather than the west side.
Yes.
That
The
makes
only
sense.
way to get cars
Yeah.
around the building
Mhm.
and have your pickup on the driver's side is to go in front of it.
Right.
So it's a challenging site.
It's
So-
all there.
Yeah.
What you're doing is exactly, you're just on the right, but minor tweaking.
Yeah, accolades for
Would make it-
wanting to develop that property, but
That would be my recommendation. Would be
Okay.
number 4.
Is that? Well, I'll leave it to the chair.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I can make the motion. I would move to recommend alternative 4, that the Plan and Zoning Commission defer action on the request and refer it back to city staff and the applicant for additional information and additional design concepts.
I don't think you can ask for concepts. I think you have to just say what you want asked for. It's not a
Is
menu
that-
of choices. It's,
Sure. Is that something that that the staff can pick from the discussion we've had, or do you?
I think you need to put it in the motion. I don't think it's fair for me to interpret.
Okay. I'm going to try and attempt this, and maybe
Nope,
the commission
I can.
members can
Yes,
fill in.
yes.
So alternative 4, defer the action on the request and refer it back to city staff and applicant for additional information as discussed in the commission meeting and listed as looking at the site to explore options to pull the building closer to both the streets, 30th Street and Grand Avenue. Number 2, to, how do you frame that?
Relocate the drive-through.
Relocate the drive-through towards the west side of the proposed development. And activate the intersection both on the north and the east side by way of increasing and exploring creative landscaping and site layout options. Anything else?
Well, the facade. You want more windows?
And number 3, I don't know if you've got all of this.
We're going to have that read back.
Number 3, to explore options to wrap around the architectural character of Grand Avenue side of the building, to wrap around on the north along 30th Street facade.
You're looking at me?
Well, I'm wondering if you're adding, if you want to.
No, I just don't think you can't change 2 sides of the building to get 2 drive-throughs.
We've got a motion going here.
Okay, that's okay. Yep.
Did I capture that? Is there something that I'm missing?
No, I think those 3 points, I mean, more or less get at what we've been discussing.
Can we read that back so we, to the extent that you can, without listening, you have to read something back.
Okay, so to defer action on the request of staff and ask for additional information, looking at the site to pull the building closer to Grand Avenue and 30th Street. Second, to relocate the drive-through to the west side of the development. And on the north and east side with creative landscaping. And number 3, to explore options to wrap the facade from Grand Avenue along the 30th Street.
Can we ask for clarification on 2, like the landscaping part? Because I didn't hear what you said and I didn't hear what she read back. Sorry.
What was the second that you
It said on the north and east side to have creative landscaping.
Okay.
creative landscaping options or increased,
Well,
improved landscaping?
could say up to the current code on that corner. Up to the current code on that corner.
So I would
I don't know what the best.
I
way
would
to
make
say
that a
it is.
4 then. I mean,
Sorry?
We can leave it as it is. I mean, there's flexibility there in what you said. In the language.
Yeah, I don't necessarily
Yeah.
want it to, I mean,
It doesn't
I
have to.
want to give the applicant the flexibility if they're doing these other things, to have flexibility with landscaping. But again, if you're by a street like Grand Avenue, you definitely want a little more visual screening and a little more appealing landscape through trees or ornamentals or whatever, which is why I said a little more creative, enhanced landscaping options. I don't know.
Is there a second?
Do you want to replace that with enhanced landscaping instead of creative? Yeah.
We done talking about it? Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Alternative 4. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Commission
Okay,
comments.
so
Go ahead,
I
Kelly.
guess I would have understood that better.
Jesus Christ.
Did you close the public hearing?
No, I didn't.
So the public hearing will be continued. So make a second motion. The public hearing is continued to the next meeting is August. We intend to come back at the next meeting. So we need to be date specific and you need to continue the public hearing to that date. It's August 7th is your first meeting in August. So you need a second motion to continue the public hearing to August 7th.
Make a motion to continue the public hearing.
Been moved and seconded to continue the public hearing to August 2nd, 7th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Yep.
Commission comments. Ruth?
No, none, sorry.
No.
I have none.
Nothing.
No.
Oh, what in the world is happening to the Kmart building? That's off what we had talked about.
You guys
Now changed completely?
not at all. It's the plan that you reviewed and approved, recommended approval to the city council last fall.
Storage.
Oh, that's just one small piece of it.
That's a piece of it. They obtained a special use permit to allow that in the rear of the existing building.
Okay, because I thought that was, from what I've been seeing in the news and everything, that had been changed.
Nope, that was part of the proposal from day one.
That's it.
Kelly, do you have anything?
We had a workshop last night on Ames Plan 2040, and we won't bring it to you on August 7th because I won't be here. But it was the first draft of the scenario planning for the external growth of the city. And so council spent about 2.5 hours walking through these 4 scenarios, asking questions, getting understanding of it, and we'll bring that back to you again in August for you to get a glimpse at that as well. There is a second scenario component where we're looking at infill elements also. That part's not done yet. That'll be available in August. So last night was the unveiling of this. The public input piece will start at the end of the month and go through August, where people have an option to go online and use tools to mark up these areas with comments, questions, whatever that is. And then there'll also be a design studio that RDG will be operating for. So it's a drop-in opportunity for maybe the public to come in and talk with RDG, review the drawings, ask questions and provide input through that. So it's not going to be a formal meeting, but you'll have hours where you can just drop in and visit with the consultant team about what was proposed or why, and give us feedback as well. We don't have a date for that yet. It'll be towards the end of August though. So then, yeah, so we'll walk through some of that information with you in August. I don't think it'll be a 2.5 hour discussion. You have the benefit of if you want to watch the broadcast and understand what council had questions about and some of those details. And remember, it was shaped around 4 different individual scenarios that had 15,000 people in each. So it was an evaluation of 60,000 people in total, but it was 4 discrete 15,000 person options. And then from there, we'll add in the infill information, and then likelihood is in September after getting some input on this, and we'll start to look at how to piece together maybe a preferred project to help create a draft plan then where we can start to review that with you and with the public and get towards a complete document. You have a draft agenda for the 7th also. Some of those items may or may not make it, but now you definitely have an item for the 7th of August.
Is that all you have, Kelly?
That's all I have.
Adjourned.